Picture it. You're scoping out the upper floors of an abandoned insane asylum in upstate New York, and you stumble upon not one, not 10, not 50, but over 400 suitcases of former patients in the attic. What on earth? This discovery was almost a century in the making, but it reflects the history of a really important hospital and one that's critically endangered of being lost. This abandoned hospital has dozens, if not hundreds, of pages dedicated to telling its story, from the Seneca County government to inmates of Willard. So, why are we covering it? Willard is home to a very special project, something incredibly rare and even considered a miracle: recovered patient property. This is Madeline Firestein with Rooted in Place, where even the darkest places can shed light. Before I get into all of that, it's very important we understand the history of Willard, its legacy, and its ultimate struggle for preservation. In 1864, in the middle of the Civil War, Dr. Sylvester D. Willard was authorized by the New York Senate to investigate the conditions of insane inmates in the county poorhouses, almshouses, asylums, and prisons. Willard reported his findings to a panel of judges, but he sadly died before the passage of a law that created a new institution for the insane, one named in his honor. He was even made the Surgeon General of New York, but he died, struck down by typhoid fever, before the Willard Act passed in 1865. The Willard Act authorized the construction of the Willard Asylum for the chronic insane. The act stated, "Let an institution for the incurables be established. Let the incurables be colonized." By removing the insane from these overcrowded jails and almshouses where their abuse and treatment could not be supervised, this act allowed for single state institutions to take over and care for this vulnerable population. The asylum was modeled after the state hospital in Utica, which had been founded nearly 20 years earlier. At that time, there was a vicious cycle of patients being taken from these poorhouses and these jails and brought to the Utica State Hospital for a 2-year trial period to see if they would fit and if they could be cured. If not, they were remanded back to wherever they came from: the prison, the workhouse, the almshouse. Willard sought to correct this gross oversight. Built in the Second Empire style, Willard Asylum features classic Kirkbride features and design. Check out our last video on Thomas Story Kirkbride's revolutionary and therapeutic architecture to learn more about this innovative design. According to Willard's nomination for placement in the National Registry of Historic Places, the extensive use of masonry construction afforded not only excellent structural stability, but contributed as well as to the resistance of fire spread, to sound transmission, and to the abuse of more violent patients. At the time of its completion in the 1880s, the main asylum building was said to be the largest of its kind. Its lakeside location provided an extra therapeutic effect. Thus, Willard officially opened in September of 1869. The first patient arrived by steamboat the following month. When Willard first opened, medical examiners needed to certify reasons for admission and make sure the person was truly insane. The main central building was built to accommodate a mere 250 patients, but that didn't last long. In 1881, there were 552 patients in that central building, with an additional 1,400 in the freestanding cottages. By the 1910s, Willard had swelled to 2,500 patients. As Willard's population grew, so did the number of detached buildings. Gendered cottages, infirmaries, and staff housing were constructed to reflect Willard's growing importance in the country. 1890 brought a new change to the site. No longer would it be considered the Willard Asylum for the Insane, but rather the Willard State Hospital, which reflected the expansion of the patients that were admitted and the services the hospital offered. Those admitted were subjected to a myriad of treatments: hydrotherapy, insulin shock, electroshock, as well as occupational and musical therapies. Psychiatric drugs were introduced in the 1950s. Turkish baths and x-rays were also on site. Steamboats arrived several times a day to deliver mail. And soon, by the turn of the century, Willard had its own telegraph and telephone service. The local community supplied Willard with all of his necessities and apparel. The public was welcome to field days and parades on the spacious grounds. The inmates were not sheltered and locked away as in other places, but rather they would participate in events, do volunteer work, and produce goods that would be sold to the local community. Eventually, a firehouse and railroad were put on site to serve the local Willard community. In 1890, Willard became the first mental institution to have its own on-site infirmary. The infirmary was not just an innovation, but a necessity. Willard's patients were victimized by the era's diseases: typhoid fever, diphtheria, and tuberculosis. Gendered tuberculosis wings were established in response to the rising rates of infection. The Spanish influenza had a significant impact on operations at Willard, infecting hundreds and killing dozens. In 1974, the name changed one final time to the Willard Psychiatric Center. However, there was a new emerging trend occurring at the same time. These massive insane asylums were closing, relocating patients out of what many deemed mental case institutions. Families preferred more home-like settings for their loved ones. In 1975, that same National Registry for Historic Places form was filed as patients were being removed from Willard in a mass exodus. With the final vacating of the Central Administration Corps in the fall of 1979, the entire complex is abandoned and demolition is scheduled by the New York State Department of Mental Hygiene. The on-site nurses' school graduated its final class in 1978. Doors finally shut in 1995. At that point, Willard only had 135 patients. The hospital cemetery is the final resting place for over 5,000 souls, housing a quarter of the patients who died at the asylum. Most are unmarked and unknown. There is a small section of the cemetery reserved for Jewish patients, who are still unclaimed. Only the Civil War veterans have true individual headstones. When the hospital closed in 1995, employee Bev Courtwright was charged with cataloging and categorizing items in the historic buildings, seeing what could be saved and what could be tossed. Within the sheltered workshop building, where occupational therapy and vocational training once occurred, something truly remarkable lay covered in dust and bird droppings. Upon entering the attic, Bev discovered something truly remarkable: the suitcases of over 400 patients. Dated between 1910 and 1960, the suitcases were then transferred to the New York State Museum, where they were overseen by curator Craig Williams. It was Craig who contacted psychiatrist Peter Statsny and human rights advocate Darby Penny. Their 2009 book, The Lives They Left Behind: Suitcases from a State Hospital Attic, not only unpacks the contents in this luggage, but reveals a portrait of American psychiatry in the 20th century: the good, the bad, and the ugly. Of the 427 documented suitcases, 25 were selected for further research and display. The Willard Suitcases project blossomed into a traveling exhibit, conversation piece, and a testament to life not just in Willard, but across American insane asylums, especially ones that echo the Kirkbride design. We spotlighted Willard in our 2026 Endangered Hospitals to Watch. The year that Willard closed, a modern drug rehabilitation center moved in. It is still active on the grounds, and so is a prison. The Preservation Society of New York selected the Willard Asylum for the Insane for its 2022 7 to Save campaign, citing a threat of imminent demolition and campus reuse. Colleen Spalesi of the Willard Cemetery Memorial Project has been in conversation with the state of New York for over a decade on preserving the abandoned cemetery in the event the rest of the campus is lost. Technically, the state owns all of Willard, even the unmarked graves. The Romulus Historical Society continues to advocate for the preservation of Willard State Hospital. Additionally, as of 2023, the Seneca County Industrial Development Agency has crafted several models for redesign and reuse that favors as much historic preservation as possible. An 1865 decision to construct a new insane asylum in the Seneca Lake region led to the warehousing of over 55,000 patients. Willard State Hospital is not just another scary structure. It was a community within a community, a built society that sought to protect one of the nation's most vulnerable populations, the mentally ill. While not all went right with Willard, we could be the stewards of its past and the protectors of its future. To learn more, check out the links to Willard resources in the description and follow us on social media. This is Madeline Feierstein with Rooted in Place. Thank you for watching.